So, one of the great supporters of our department, and the faculty knows this just as I do, is a fellow by the name of Kevin Millott. Kevin came to us very early on, and I'll tell the story. I joined the department 7 years ago from Silicon Valley. I was in Silicon Valley for 30 years and doing the high-tech thing, and I cashed out because I was really upset about the STEM education crisis that I saw brewing, and I had to put plants outside the United States, and France was good, England was okay, but I wasn't going to Malaysia. So I cashed out and decided I, as an engineer, wanted to fix things. Well, I linked up with a college, and there's a story there, but we won't go into that. But one of my first 5 things to do was close down this new program called cybersecurity. Why? Well, we had 3 students, and it was simply a crime. So who cared? Companies didn't care. No one really cared. Nobody really saw the crisis coming. Some of you maybe did. So that was my first 5 objectives given to me by my dean, who was not John Hardesty at the time. Bill said, what I want you to do before you do that is I want you to go out and find some people to talk to. I had some connections at the NSA and DoD myself from working at Raytheon, and make sure that this is the right thing to do. Well, I met Kevin, and Kevin said, it's the wrong thing to do, and I will help you build this department. Well, Kevin, 7 years later, you're opening up our 2nd cybersecurity conference, 3rd if you count the one that we did with CIE years ago, and look at what we've done. We have 270 cybersecurity student enrollments this year. We're teaching a class at Dell for TI, Raytheon, and Dell students. We have 30 students there. Patrice, would you stand up? Patrice is representing Dell today. Thank you. And now the country recognizes that this is a huge problem as well. So Kevin, my thanks, my friend. Kevin's going to tell you today a little bit about himself. He has a very colorful past. I'm not sure what parts of it he'll want to bring up. But he's the president of Erase.com. And if he doesn't want to tell you some of his past, Helena will be more than glad to. She's the beautiful lady out there at Kevin's table. At any rate, Kevin started with our department as our first advisory board member. And he continues to this day to be our strongest supporter. Kevin?
Good morning. Okay, first of all, I have a totally whacked out, demented sense of humor, and there's nothing I can do about it. Get that out of the way right now. I see things funny that not everybody fully appreciates. Has to do with working with a lot of strange characters, a few of which are in this room. How many of you work with crazy people? Don't point at them if they're here. Just all right. So my entire career, I've worked with a percentage of crazy people. Might have been really good at what they did, but they were still a little nutty. That has caused me to have a different perception. The cybersecurity issue. I'm an old guy, so we're going to go back in time here. I'm going to tell you how I started out with this. How many of you guys know what the ARPANET is? Okay, if you don't know what it is, find out. History is really important. If you don't know where you've been, you're not going to know where you're going. Okay, ARPANET was the original concept of the government, which has ended up being the intranet. But I was trained on a machine called a LEADS machine. Anybody ever heard of that? Law Enforcement Agency Data System. It was pretty cool. The console was about the size of one of your tables and weighed about 3,000 pounds. We would type out a message. Now, I can type fast. I can do about 80 words a minute. But I would type out a message, and it would take 45 minutes for the machine to punch it out on 1-inch wide parchment tape. That tape would be 150 feet long. We then would tear it off. And by the way, I typed a paragraph. That's it, 4 sentences. And this tape would be 150 feet long. We then would take the spindle part of the machine, open it up, and lay the tape over the spindles. It would grab the holes, and then it would suck it into the machine and go ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk for about 30, 40 minutes. And then 4 hours later, I'd get an answer back that said, don't even think about it. That was it. You know, and it took hours and hours. So as I've gotten older, I start thinking about I should probably hunt down the guy that invented fax, email, text, and the original leads machine because it was a lot simpler before I had all that. How many of you remember when someone would call you up and say, I need this, you go, okay, I'll have it to you next week. How many of you remember that? And now it's like 2 in the morning, they think I have it with me in bed sleeping. I'm like, what's wrong with you guys? Go to sleep. And by the way, all answers that come when I'm unprepared in the middle of the night with no warning are no. Everybody know that one? Okay, that's management practice. If you're not ready, it's no. All right, so with that in mind, we're going to talk today about a little shift. And I'm not saying all the code writers and all the firewall folks and all that should stop. But I'm telling you, I think we need to think a little differently about what we're doing. So the first part of this presentation could be overwhelming, even depressing. If you're subject to depression, stand by with the Xanax. But we're going to talk about the reality of what's really going on and what you're up against. And then I want to just change the paradigm for a second and think a little differently about what we're doing. Because as I'm going around the country, and I go do a lot of work with the U.S. government and a bunch of foreign governments and foreign corporations, and I see everybody spending tons and tons of resources, and they're losing. How many of you guys ever feel overwhelmed? Yeah, and ladies, by the way, I grew up in Chicago, so guys is men and women and everybody, okay? We didn't know back then, but we included everybody in between, even when we were back then saying guys. So the fact of the matter is, a lot of us go in and don't have enough resources, we don't have enough personnel, we certainly don't have enough trained personnel, and we're getting hammered nonstop. While we're trying to fix what the current problem is, 10 more problems come in. I'm starting to feel at times like the Dutch boy in the dike. Anybody remember that story? You know, every holy plug popped open 2 more. So with that in mind, I'm not advocating that we give up defensive practices, but I think we need to be looking outside the box other than just at defensive practices. So with that in mind, we're going to go forward here. If I can run this, there we go. In November of 2014, and let me back up for a second, I started my 41st year in this stuff in April, 1st of April. Began my 41st year. So I've played with a lot of characters. The circus is the same, and they just have different clowns. You know, every circus has got trapeze, they all got lions, they all got elephants. So I don't care what circuses we're going to, there's certain acts that are there, every one of them. And any of you that have ever moved between companies will know that you see the same acts everywhere you go. So with that in mind, after 40 years of working in this, I've seen some pretty interesting things repeat themselves, and I've seen some interesting things jumping out that are not from the past, so they're very much a new perspective. So I wanted to mention this meeting that I had in November of 2014, and in the meetings was Secretary Jay Johnson from Homeland Security, Director Comey, Jim Comey from the FBI, and also Mike Hayden. And Mike used to be, he was a general in the Air Force, but he was the director of the NSA and the director of CIA. So these are people that are somewhat plugged in, okay? Now, when I was younger, I always thought the government was way ahead of the private sector. Halfway through my career, I found out the government doesn't have a clue, and the private sector's got a lot of good stuff going on, but they don't tell anybody, which is pretty interesting because forever in a day the spooks wouldn't tell you what they were doing. Then I found out the private sector was even worse on sharing. Okay, and you know, as soon as you just attach a price value to it, everybody clams up real quick, or they don't work there any longer. So in this meeting that we had, it was a 2-day meeting, and each of these individuals had individual meetings with me and a couple other guys after this main program. And it was really interesting because for the first time ever, I heard the intelligence agencies, the FBI and Homeland Security all agree on one thing, and that is we need a whole lot more cyber people. Now, let's just step back for a second. Realize that a bunch of federal agencies are all competing to be the king of cyber. Are you aware of that? Okay, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, on the outside, I look at a lot of different programs, what's going on. One of my functions, I work with the FBI InfraGard team as a sector chief. And my sector, I have 2 sectors actually, nuclear materials, not that anything could go wrong with that, and chemicals and hazardous materials. So I've got those 2 sectors, but I also work with a variety of other agencies in covert operations, and I work with the Intel and the Department of Defense. And it's pretty wild that I go from one meeting to another, and almost always the last thing I hear before I leave one meeting is, don't tell those other guys about this. And I'm like, come on, everybody's overwhelmed. How come we can't tell everybody else we need help? But this was amazing to me that all three of these individuals said, we got to get a whole lot more cyber professionals really, really fast. And at the one meeting, they showed this survey that showed 225,000 cybersecurity positions went unfilled last year. So remember, everything about surveys is, number one, who did they ask? And at what level of a person did they ask, et cetera. So I would, based on my experience, say if they were 225,000 empty jobs that didn't get filled last year, it's probably more like 400 based on who didn't respond to the survey, who didn't talk, and who's not being honest. So any students in the room? Glad you got up early today, okay? Your opportunities are phenomenal. In fact, the CEO of Snapchat, how many of you saw what he did 2 weeks ago to outmaneuver Google? Oh, this is awesome. Top-level cybersecurity professionals from any one of 5 universities, starting pay $500,000 a year, $350,000 in stock, added on the $500,000, 3-year guarantee contract, because he can't get the same people that he wants because Google's outmaneuvering them, and everybody else in the IT world is outmaneuvering each other to get those individuals. Now, when they raise your starting salary to $500 a year to start, that's not so bad. You could take a couple vacations on that. Okay? Now, the fact is, it's going to get worse. The shortage of trained personnel and qualified personnel is going to get worse. And here's the best part about it. Most of you, and I don't know all of you, I don't have files on all of you, I got files on a few of you, but most of you are probably good people. Any dark ones in here, evil? Got any evil in here? Okay, I know you. That's no change. The fact is, most of you are good people. If you're good people, you do not think the way evil bad guys think. And one of the things that our company specializes in is dealing with field operations. We deal with really, really bad people. And we do it on a regular basis. And to deal with bad people, you have to think somewhat like bad people without crossing over the line. And what I find is some of the best cybersecurity people I know are really good, and they do not see it coming because their brains are not warped enough to see the way the bad guys are going to operate. Does that make sense? Everybody understand what I'm saying? I mean, I have cyber professional guys tell me, Ray, where do they come up with this stuff? Well, actually, in their world, this is routine. You know, they'll cut their own parents in half and ship them off in a box and not bat an eye. You know, that's a whole different thinking process. And here's the amazing thing. When we get into cybersecurity and we start talking about code and we talk about writing things, it's coming from the human mind. Even though we're constricted by binary coding and so forth, there's a lot of human creativity. Some of the best applications, would you agree, were written by creative people? Well, if the bad guys get creative at being bad, they come up with some crazy attack vectors and some real strange ways of hitting us. And one of our problems is, even though we have highly trained individuals, they may not be experienced at working in the bad side or the evil side. And how many of you guys know about the dark side of the internet? You know about that? All right. Man, if you hang out there at all, first of all, you'll probably get picked up on someone's radar if you do. But if you look at some of the stuff that's posted in there, it's demented big time. I mean, it's really off the chart. And so where do we get that blend of experience from being able to perceive what the evil guys are doing, but write the good stuff at the same time? That's a tough one. So even though we may get more people through the educational system, I haven't quite figured out yet how we get more people to understand evil other than doing internships and investigation units like what we run. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you. Okay, you're talking about a new program? Okay. Okay, well, we're going to, at the end of this, we're going to have a Q&A session, and I'll get in a little bit. My biggest issue on new programs I see is they're written by nice people. I mean, I've seen some curriculum, was well-written curriculum, had absolutely nothing to do with the dark side. Okay, and so that's a tough one, and like I said, the only way I've come up with so far is to have people like you do internships with investigation units like us, but the problem is most investigation units won't let anybody work with them who hasn't been working with them for a long time. I mean, if you work with me on an investigation, I already know where your kids go to school, how you take your coffee, etc. You know, we know each other really well, but somehow we got to bridge that. In the meantime, there's a big demand, money's going up, there's a shortage of personnel, the problem's getting worse. Okay, let's talk about some of the new and expanding exposures. And again, I'm not trying to get you depressed, but I want you to understand what's coming your way and the magnitude of this. We talked about mobile devices back at the engineering series when we did that one night presentation, but the mobile device deal is totally out of control and going to get a lot worse. First of all, it's really important to understand that most of the C-level suite folks have no clue what cyber is. Most of them don't have the slightest concept of how this works. It's like, you know, the 16-year-old that wants to get a driver's license but has no idea how the engine works. They don't know it takes oil. They don't know that you have to put air in your tires. They just know they drive it. And so we have a lot of this at the very top. The problem with that is the decisions for funding and resources and what you can and can't do is influenced by a lack of knowledge. This idea of people using their own, personally owned mobile devices in the corporate enterprise is crazy. Nuts. Nobody in their right mind in the cyber world would do that on purpose. But I certainly get it from a budget point of view, and everybody whines, by the way. I mean, even in the government, use more than one device. Never thought I'd hear that one, but that was a good one. I don't want to use more than one device, so I'm just going to use my own system. I mean, it's extended from the lowest level sales rep all the way up to the top people in government now. Lazy. Security's inconvenient. I'm not doing it. And you know what? They win. The decision makers will quite often side with that over security because security is inconvenient, and everybody knows that. But this idea of using your own device, heavily done, everybody's writing, here's how we do this, bring your own device, how we're going to work through it. You're never going to work through it because they will always outrun you, and they have more people on their team than you have on yours. If we look at this, it's typically operated on protected and unprotected networks, which means a person comes to work and uses it on a protected network that you're running, and then they go to Starbucks and 30 other places and use the same device on totally unprotected networks. Okay, so that's a big issue, and it's getting worse. And here's what I want to kind of point out to you. We also now have everybody sharing their mobile devices. I about passed out a couple of weeks ago. I was in a coffee shop, and I watched 3 kids use the same iPad, and then I watched them use the same phone to send messages to different people. Crazy stuff, and they don't have to understand about the legal liability of that. 3 of the investigations we did in this last year had federally illegal material on cell phones, and there were 9 people associated with using the 2 cell phones. So now we're trying to figure out who actually put that material on there when 9 people admitted, oh, we share that device all the time. Source reliability is an hourly proposition. In other words, the secure aspect of that source, thinking that you got to secure. You guys put some software on it, you did something to secure that device. An hour later, it's no longer secure because of the way the operators use the equipment and because of the networks that they go in and out of. So no matter what you do to try to secure a personal device, about an hour later, it's probably not secure. Now, I understand there are people that follow the rules and stay within the lines and all that, but they're very small numbers compared to the general population. The owners and operators are extremely hesitant to turn over their devices. This is hysterical. Every time we come in on an investigation, we want to look at personal devices, everybody freaks out. And my first thing is, what do you got on there you don't want us to see? I mean, it could be illegal materials, it could be unethical materials, and it could just be nasty comments about their boss. I don't know. Could be what they're doing with a coworker. Beats me. But nobody wants to hand over. And you guys ever had problems getting someone in your organization to hand over their cell phone? Yeah. You know, it's like, come on, what could possibly be on there? But the fact is, there's a lot of stuff on there that they don't want you to see. So Now we've allowed them to access our network, our enterprise system, but they're not going to give it up when we need to follow up on an investigation. So a lot of issues. Here's the big deal right here. Now, I don't know if you guys can see that, read the numbers, but the 2015 estimated sales of mobile phones, and this is in the millions, by the way, is 1,952.9 million new units. That's a lot of technology. And if we look over on the right side, where it talks about tablets, they're talking about in 2017 it should be 406.8 million new tablets coming online. Now keep in mind, that's coming online. That's not including what's already out there. All right, so this is a gigantic expansion issue that's going to get more and more and more severe and greater in magnitude. Okay, so that's one of my concerns right there. By the way, you guys, this doesn't have to be expository writing. If you want this presentation, my email will be at the end. You can just send it to me and I'll send you the PowerPoint, okay? Okay, automobiles. How many of you thought about what's happening with automobiles? Okay, well, British Telecom just created a new ethical hacker unit to try to figure out how to protect cars from being penetrated, where someone could take over the controls of the car while you're driving. And with cars being Wi-Fi, 3G and 4G networks and mobile networks, they've already figured out that there's ways they can get backwards into the main computer for the car's ignition system, braking system, etc., via the radio frequency connection to the vehicle. Can you imagine that? You're going down the toll road, doing the speed limit, of course. Not in Texas. But let's say you're doing at least 70 and suddenly you lose your braking and control your engine. Could that be bad? There's no mechanical stuff. I'm not going to be picking on a particular manufacturer, but in the last couple of years, there's one particular aircraft manufacturer that does fly-by-wire that's been losing planes like crazy. And nobody knows why. Now, in the old days, anybody ever fly, you could actually feel in the controls, the cables going to the various control surfaces of the plane. Today, there's no feel, there's no resistance, there's no mechanical connection on some aircraft. And now our cars are getting to be like that. Okay, so they're worried about automobiles enough that BT is setting up an ethical hacking team to try to figure out how to protect mobile systems in automobiles. International crime activities are on the rise. This is an actual case I'm going to give you. And by the way, if you guys want case histories, I've got thousands of ongoing case histories all the time. There's absolutely no end to examples if you want to look at what's going on out there. But I picked this one in particular because note that I'm saying international crime activities are on the rise. Not only does the internet help people connect for business, but it also helps them connect for criminal business. And some of the finest criminals I worked on were organized crime guys that had massive business operations. And they had numerous accountants and numerous financial advisors, and they ran their criminal enterprises as a business. So it's no surprise that criminal enterprises are now using the internet to connect with each other. But this case was very interesting. This is an FBI indictment that came down this year. And I want you to note here, we've got two people that are both citizens of Vietnam who resided in the Netherlands, who hooked up with a guy out of Canada to carry out the cyber crimes. Now, a few years ago, that would have been a bit difficult, let alone how would you find anybody? I mean, how would two guys out of Vietnam show up in the Netherlands and connect with a Canadian? I mean, by the way, you can walk around the street and say, I'm a criminal, I'm looking for a partner. I mean, you know, how would you do that, right? Well, now on the internet, they find each other on the bad side of the net. They can say how they're going to operate, what they're going to do, and someone says, I'm in, I'll work with you on that. And away they go. It's a total game changer on how criminals meet each other and how they make alliances. So with that in mind, this is pretty interesting. These characters here went after data in the US and then selling the data, and then the guy in Canada laundered the money. That's the short version. What they did was very smart, very sophisticated, but it was very, very compact. They didn't go for a wide attack. They went after certain exact same targets, certain industry, and they got their money pretty quick, and they had the guy in Canada launder it through fake business setups. But my point is, if you want to prosecute that case, we're not even talking the cloud here, because that's another nightmare. But if you want to prosecute that case, are you all aware of the fact that the laws in Vietnam, the Netherlands, and Canada and the US are different? And nobody agrees on what the law should be. We have due out the end of this month. I highly recommend you guys get your hands on this. It's the U.S. Trade Representative's 301R report. How many of you know what that is? Here we go. Come on, catch up. 301R report is the report on all the countries in the world that do not honor intellectual property rights. Okay, so it's called USTR, United States Trade Representative 301R. That's the report. It comes out April 30th every year. And it lists all the bad guys who do not honor intellectual property rights. And if you're going to do business with them, which is why it's from the Trade Representative Office, if you're going to do business with them, get ready for them to steal your intellectual property, and there's nothing we can do about it. Now, you know what the funniest thing is? I looked at the 2014 report. I was trying to get an advanced copy of the 2015, but it's out for a hearing right now. But it was really funny. I noticed that all the top players who are the worst are the exact people that our current administration is trying to make good guy deals with. I'm like, who's up on that gig? I mean, you look at this list of criminals and countries that don't follow the normal laws of protecting intellectual property, knowing that's a big part of our economy, and then why would we make a deal with them? They're bad guys. You all know that bad guys lie. Are you aware of that? Yeah, I've had interrogations we've done, and people say, well, we interviewed him. He didn't admit to that. I go, he's a liar. He's a bad guy. It's okay in his mind to lie to you. Okay, so here we have countries that will lie to us and do whatever, and they're stealing us blind, and we're going to make deals with them. Now, what you guys got to watch for is you need to get a current copy when it comes out on April 30th of this report. Because just like the nation-state sponsors of terrorism, where they're taking all the bad guys off that list, you watch. They're going to start taking all the bad guys off the trade representative list, but that doesn't mean they're not doing it anymore. I mean, someone made a political deal. So you really need to look at that 301R report when it comes out this month, and then keep that on the shelf for future reference. Because chances of a country suddenly straightening up when you go to do business there 2 years from now is zero, other than there's a coup. Okay, so just get a hold of that, have a little history on your shelf, and be prepared if you start doing business in that country. But these international operations are tough. They're really difficult, and they take a lot of energy out of you. And so that increase in international crime operations, organized crime operations, is a bad sign for us. Yes, sir?
So does the United States respect and recognize the intellectual property rights of all other countries?
We have a set of laws that address intellectual property, and I wouldn't say they're as stringent as other countries, but they're pretty much considered the base model. So if another country or another company in a foreign country catches a U.S. company doing that, they will charge them. And in fact, we've been involved in several of those investigations the last couple of years where U.S. companies paid people to hack foreign companies and steal their data. And by the way, the U.S. has no immunity from having evil bad guys. We have some of the best bad guys in the world operating out of the U.S. And they're very experienced. Okay, I mean, I can't do it up here, but I can give you some crime, organized crime stuff. Unbelievable. And even when I arrested guys and was interrogating them, they were like, yeah, well, you got me, but you didn't get me on everything. Even when they're going to jail for 30 years, they'll tell me, you didn't get me on everything. Now I'm like, oh, now I got to go to the prison and keep interrogating them. But the fact of the matter is we have a lot of bad guys in the U.S. And by the way, I can drive any bus full of people I want across our border. So, I mean, they're coming and going out of the U.S. all the time. And one of the best things about the U.S. is that we encourage the idea of innovation and capitalism. Well, most criminals like innovation and making money. So this actually is a good place. But we do have laws, and if they get caught, they will get prosecuted, providing an investigation can pull them all together. Now keep in mind, these guys here in this case, the crimes they carried out were in the U.S. That's where they did all the penetration, all the data that was in the US. But trying to round them all up and get them all tied under one jurisdiction, that's pretty exciting stuff. And it's increasing. Okay, the terrorists are getting involved. How many of you noticed the increased use of the internet for all sorts of nefarious purposes by ISIL? Okay, they've got all sorts of stuff going on. And one of the things they've been experimenting with lately is taking over other host networks so they can use your IP and your computers to put their stuff out. That then gets a knock on the door from certain agencies that you probably don't want to meet. And they're going, why are you pumping this stuff out? And you're like, huh, what? We don't know anything about it. So the terrorist involvement's growing. ISIL's leading the pack. I'd like to point out that the CIO for ISIL was trained at Northeastern University in Massachusetts. He has a master's in computer sciences and another one in cybersecurity. And he was working on his doctorate before he went to work for the bad guys. So he's not a stupid guy. He's a smart guy. And he's been very good at maneuvering them through the data systems. He's only one of many that are working over there. And by the way, while he is ideologically aligned with ISIL, we have all sorts of criminals that sell criminal activities as a software service that could care less about the ideology, but if you pay them the right price, they'll work for you. Okay, so this is on the upsweep right now. For financial gain, definitely for retribution. Remember the attacks on all the military sites? They hit the Central Command, hit Special Operations Command out of Tampa. They've hit their public websites. They've hit internally. They hit the White House. No big target there, but I mean, you know, the fact is they are doing retribution, and they don't care where they're going. They have no rules to follow at all. Could be as a component of a physical attack. In other words, they want to go attack a facility, so they take down a control system that does access control, so they can get through controlled doors. All right? And by the way, if someone takes off your access control system, and you walk up and scan, and the door opens, but how many of you guys try the door without scanning? You may not even know it's been compromised. Does that make sense to everybody? Because most secure doors have automatic closers. So we've been at a couple facilities in the past couple years where we're doing audits, and we'll walk up and see that the door is unlocked even though the access control system's on. Now sometimes it's a glitch, sometimes it's a routine maintenance issue, but they can come in from the outside and do a variety of cyber attacks to help them carry out a physical attack. Communications process associated with the attack. They may take out certain networks so they can use your network to get messages to their own personnel carrying out the attacks. In the investigation world, in the intelligence world, you typically aren't looking at a known corporation as the distribution point for terrorist communications. Does that make sense? Like everybody probably heard, okay, they put a video on YouTube, they're using Yahoo, they're using AOL emails, whatever. Very seldom do you see them coming out using a regular .com business server, etc., but they're starting to do it. And so they're penetrating corporate networks so they can send out communications to their guys about attack operations, and that's not on the radar of the feds, but it's coming on there. Now, as it comes on the radar of the government, that's not good news for you either. I mean, you guys got enough to do, let alone guys knocking on your door saying, hey, we want to talk to you about these 400 messages that came off of one of your servers. So the bottom line, it's an expanding exposure. Recruitment process. They're obviously using the internet for recruitment. All these videos that they show, all these horrific things that they're doing, they put that out there to recruit, and it's working. There's hundreds of people from the US that have gone overseas and are fighting with ISIL, and there's more that have tried to go that got caught. And that's the same thing throughout Western Europe and even in Asia, where a lot of people have gone to recruit or have gone to fight because they were recruited over the internet. Now remember, very important key point, the internet lies. And when it comes to terrorists, it lies really big time. And if you talk to any of these people that have gotten out of there and come back, and by the way, if you're a jihadist, you have to die on the battlefield. The only jihadi that comes back is still on a mission. It's not like a one-year enlistment like the U.S. or two-year enlistment like the U.S. military. If you go, you're fighting until you're dead, until the battle's won, and if you come back, you're still on a mission. Well, a few people have gotten out of it, and if you ask them, they'll tell you it wasn't at all like they promised over the internet. You're like, really? I can't believe they lied to you. These fine, upstanding individuals cutting people's heads off, who could think they would lie to you about conditions? The fact is, they're doing it, it's working, and so they continue to manipulate the data transfers for their purposes. And use of non-owned systems is definitely on the rise. Also network hopping. A couple of the groups have been picked up where they had already figured out like 20 .com addresses, and they would send a message from one .com address, but the guys in the field knew to respond to a different .com, a different domain. So we call it network hopping, where I send you a message out on this one, you get a message from erase.com, and you respond back to abc.com. And so we're constantly hopping, so nobody sees both ends of the message unless you know where to go look. So that's underway, and that's been happening in Morocco, Tunisia, Spain, a little bit of Western Europe, and North Africa. Okay, how many of you heard smishing? Why do we have to keep coming up with all these weird words? Man, I worked for NASA one time on the space shuttle project, and the day I got to the Space Center, they gave me a book about 1.5 inches thick, and it was like 9, maybe 8 or 9-point font, and all it was acronyms. And they go, you got to read this book before you can come to your first meeting. I'm like, what are you guys, morons? I'm not reading a book of acronyms. Well, the first meeting I sat there realizing how stupid I was. Well, we're going to take the CBC over to OPF and take it to the TBD, and then we're going to go out to XY. Okay, I'll be right back with my book. Hold on a minute. So acronyms and all these terms are part of technical sciences. I get that. I'm a street guy. I come up with my own version of the words. But the fact is that we are creating more and more technical terms, and I want to keep this in mind. I want to keep this in the forefront. If you have to get your money and personnel from normal people, the more you throw crazy terms at them, the less they get it, the less they're going to cooperate. What did I tell you before? All answers to any weird stuff that I don't know or in the middle of the night is what? No. So you say we need to get X amount of money for so many people to deal with the smishing problem that we're having on blah, 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 blah. And I gotta go, get out of here. All right, so why we got it, I don't know, but we kind of need to watch that, because either that or you're going to have to come up with a big conversion dictionary, and no normal person is going to read that. Smishing the use of SMS to gain access to confidential information controls. Tying together the increased use of mobile devices that are unsecured into secure environments now gives the bad guys one more pathway to get inside. So the use of SMS is becoming an accelerating problem, and the best part is the people that hold the device have no clue what's going on. Okay, and I'm not going to get into the intellectual capabilities of the person who holds that device, but we are quickly outrunning their ability to understand what they're holding in their hand. Okay, the device is so powerful now, most people cannot even fathom what they're holding. All right, now I've got in my office, you guys want to get a kick, I have a televideo portable computer, 48 pounds, it's the size of a suitcase, and it had 2 diskettes that were 378K each, and that was $12,000 when I bought it. Okay? When you bought that for 12 grand, you had to know what you were doing or you wouldn't spend the 12 grand. But now, I'm in the grocery store today, there's some 6-year-old kid carrying an iPhone next to me. I'm like, hey, buddy, you selling stock on that thing or what? He's sitting there, what could a 6-year-old possibly have to say on the internet other than I'm being abducted? I mean, come on, what the heck is that about? Well, his mom gives him the iPad or the iPhone so she can cruise around the grocery store and not worry about him, and then she can find him when she's ready to leave. Hey, lady, if you're worried about him, don't let him get outside your sight. Okay? Real simple. Or the iPhone will be found inside the lettuce and the rhubarb. But the bottom line to the deal is, here's a kid powering the super powerful technical device that has unbelievable capacity, and he can't even fathom that. Now, I can also look at some 34-year-olds that I know that can't fathom it either, okay? So my point is, we've got this advancement, and now that they're using SMS as a main vector, holy mackerel, these guys don't even realize they're part of the problem, as they're bringing the device into the office and throwing it in the desk. Expansion of spammers exploiting global events. This has gotten real big last couple of years. There's an earthquake in Haiti. All this stuff comes out. It's all spammers. Everybody's donating money to guys in a little hut over on a beach in the Guyana Gulf. I mean, it's not right, folks. It's not real, but they're getting good at this. During the Olympics and in Russia, there were all sorts of deals going on selling tickets to the Olympics. It had nothing to do with the Olympics. So this use of global events now, everybody is aware of it from the media, and they see it in social media. And so then when they get a message saying this is about the hurricane zone, the tsunami, the earthquake, oh, yeah, I want to help. You know, good people want to do the right thing, but they have no clue that what they're dealing with is someone manipulating and exploiting the global event for their own personal gain. And that's on the rise big time. Increase in cooperation between nation states, cyber criminal organizations, including the manipulation of insiders. How many of you remember the Sony hack a couple months ago? The funniest thing in the world is the government and private sector guys arguing with each other about who did it, and they're all right, but none of them are completely right. Okay? Let's just say, hypothetically, North Korea hired some gunslingers from certain Eastern Bloc countries to carry some code that they wrote, and then using disgruntled former employees, they got the code where it needed to go. Now, who would be the ones behind that? A country, an organized group of criminals, and former employees, all three together. It doesn't have to just be this or that. And when people are arguing like idiots on the media about, no, it's this, no, it's that, that's because they're so far into it, they're not looking at the big picture. They're not stepping back and going, whoa, wait a minute. You know, how did this actually take place? How many of you know about the Stuxnet virus? Okay, I mean, some serious heavy-duty code writing with some good stuff, and 4 different groups involved in delivering it. Okay, and I think North Korea probably took a lesson about how that was launched and delivered and said, hey, this is a good way to go. And then guess what? It worked pretty good. And nobody's in the trick bag over it either, other than Sony's CEO. Okay, so the bottom line is they're getting better at working between these various evil entities, and that makes it even harder for us. Rapid increase in the availability and use of criminal cyber attacks as a service. You can hire anybody to take out somebody's website, and it's not expensive either. Some of the services that I've seen, obviously they're selling in bulk, because some of the attack services I've seen like $200. Well, they must be doing like $6,000 a day to make some money at $200 a clip. But they're out there, and they're effective, and they work. And at the very least, they drive people like you crazy because they keep happening. Okay, in numerous surveys and reports on cybersecurity, respondents stated that they had 1 to 5 employees assigned to cybersecurity efforts. How many of you are in a situation where you have 1 to 5 people focusing on it? Okay, that was the highest majority in respondents. And 3 of these surveys I looked at had 2,000 to 3,000 respondents. So yes, there are organizations that have a lot more people in bigger groups, although they may also have bigger targeting factors. But a lot of the organizations had 1 to 5 trying to focus on it, and they're trying to deal with the employees, the C-suite, and the bad guys. And that's pretty overwhelming. Estimates regarding the number of code writers that developed the Night Dragon attack in the Pacific Rim, and by the way, this was China that did it. There's a lot of supposition out there. There's no question about it. It's an organized group of Chinese code writers for the government. And the report that I saw that was pretty accurate, looked logical to me, said there were 2,500 guys working on it for 4 years. Okay, but they know that the least they had was 2, some people say 3,000. How many of you could withstand an attack of 2,000 plus code writers going at it nonstop for 4 years? Okay, and then everybody said, well, we can't believe they got through and got all those energy companies. What are they going to do? There's an army of bad guys working at them on one thing. Just one thing. Every day those companies deal with 100 or 200 things. One program from this group of guys working on it for 4 years. No surprise it got through to me, from my point of view, just strictly on resource allocation. So with that in mind, The reality of defending is security is inconvenient. I mentioned that earlier. And security professionals often lose out to workplace productivity. Rapid development of new threats overwhelms internal security teams. And while you're trying to address the current threats, the new ones are coming in behind you. The Identity Theft Resource Center reported that from end of year 2005 up through March 20th last month, there have been 5,203 breaches, according to their criteria. And their criteria focuses on personal identifiable information. And 778 million records stolen, and then, of course, resold multiple times. That's some serious attack stats, and it gets worse. So with that in mind, I'm just going to wrap in this last part of the program with maybe we should change the way we think. Okay? Maybe we should address this from a different approach. And again, I'm not saying give up your defensive posture, but I am saying start thinking about where you spend your resources. Okay? If you're dealing with a terrorist group and you've got a cell of 50 guys, you know what the most important thing to do is? Kill the leaders and their families. Kill them as fast as possible. It's demoralizing to the rest of the guys when no one answers their cell phone call. It's real simple. You don't go out there and play patty cake with them. You don't take out the guy who's the messenger. You kill the leaders right away and put unbelievable pain and suffering on anybody who's associated with the organization. And it really impacts recruitment. I'm not saying it's nice. I'm just saying if you want to stop them. Okay? When we look at consequence management, you got to say to yourself, well, what is the consequence if they get through? What are we going to lose when they make the attack if they get over the firewall? So let's look at a couple of points. Defense is necessary. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing it. It is part of the deal. Vulnerability assessment and protection is required. I got that. And there's a lot of products out there and a lot of people working at trying to get that done. But statistically speaking, I just got done telling you, they're getting through and they've got an expanding and increasing rate of attack coming our way. So unless you have a whole lot more resources given you, you are at some point going to get overwhelmed. But what are we doing to limit the damage if and when they get in? So I want to walk you through an exercise, and this is going to be from an actual project that we did last year that deals with managing the consequence more so than trying to stop the vulnerability. Have you applied resources to determine exactly what you're protecting? Now, I talk to cyber professionals all the time that, oh, we're protecting our network. What does that mean? What is in the network that has value or that you don't want to lose or have damage or vandalize? By the way, I'm using the term cyber vandalizing now because so many of these guys don't even steal it. They just go in and wreck the place. Looks like a frat party inside your hard drive, okay? They just vandalize the data. But the fact is, what are you protecting? Why are you protecting your network? What happens if they get in there? What's going to be the loss? And some of my cyber friends are so technically oriented that they really don't talk to loss control or loss or risk management people very well. But we really have to say, what is it we're afraid they're going to do if they get inside? Is there a better way than just trying to defend? Now, the other day, a senior technology leader said that cybersecurity professionals need to quit being on the defense and go a little bit on the offense and go out looking for signs and symptoms of people putting attacks together. And I'm okay with that. That makes sense. You start looking for the data points that show someone's getting ready to launch an attack. But I also want to caution you on this. Be very careful about going on the offense unless you have armed personnel with automatic weapons protecting your facilities. Because eventually you're going to crank up some of these bad guys who are criminals, not just cyber professionals, and they will come and hunt you down. And we've already had it a couple times. No one knows about it. It's not been publicized, but we've had bad guys show up in the U.S. to go after people who spiked them and sent them bad cyber packages, okay? So just kind of a little point of caution before you get nutty about attacking criminals. Make sure you got really good security in place so when they show up at your building, they get stopped before they get to your office. And remember the number one rule of panic, there's nothing wrong with panic as long as you're the first one to think about it. You hear pop, 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 and you're out of the building, okay, you're good. Everybody else could have a problem, but you're out of there. But be careful about that offensive stuff until you've got a real good security plan for your physical safety. All right, so is there a better way? When you do consequence management, I'm just going to give you a couple bullet points here to get your brain thinking in that groove. I'm not asking for everybody to switch over overnight, but start thinking this way. We make the assumption that the bad guys are in the house. They're already on the inside. And almost every day that you guys find them and kick them out, they're coming in somewhere else, like termites or cockroaches. They're always there. It's just a question of who left the door open. How do we limit the damage, exposure, or impact based on the type of attack? You have to assess what type of damage. Now, it could be financial damage. It could just simply be reputation harm. How many of you have seen companies take a big reputation hit in the last couple of years because of a cyber attack? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, someone takes over your website and puts some nasty stuff up there, that could be really hard to come back from. So it could be reputation, not even financial. But I'm saying you need to assess what kind of loss, what kind of damage are we concerned about. Can we outthink the attackers by design and not via code? In other words, can we design our data systems in such a way that even if they get inside, they're not going to hurt us, or we're going to have minimal damages? And that's by system design more so than actually writing code for defensive posture. Can we outthink the attackers? To do that, you got to think like a bad guy. And so you have to get a little bit of thinking outside the box, not what you would do, but how the bad guys operate. One of the other ways that I've come up with for people to learn that is by reading case histories and seeing how the bad guys got in, how they got in and got to the stuff. How many of you get the FBI bulletins every day showing all the indictments and case processing? It's available to you. It's really important that you see those things. It'll drive you nutty. You have to learn how to filter them out. But the FBI, you go to FBI.gov, you can get an email that shows you all the indictments every day. If you have a problem getting that, you let me know and I'll help you out with it. The second thing is InfraGard, the FBI outreach program, and now DHS has a new program. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But there are outreach programs from the government that will provide you with good information of case histories and who's doing what. And if you read those, I don't want you just to read them to figure out what code or what program or what virus they use. I want you to read it to go, that's how they're thinking. You know, if you read the whole process, it's not just what malware was put in, it's how did these guys get in? How did they solicit? How were they moving around? You got to start thinking how they think if you want to block them correctly. Okay. Now, if we outthink these bad guys by design, then my last statement here is very important. The road to nowhere goes to nowhere. So if I let you in my system, but you go into a dark, empty, dead-end hallway by design, you're not getting much out of that hallway. Does everybody follow me on that? I'm designing the path that if they're going to get in, here's where they're going, or if they're going to try to do something, our design is going to counteract that. Okay, so this is an actual case history. How many of you know about DDoS attacks? Drive you crazy. They're on the rise like always. Every year the stats go up. It seems like the more that are done, the more new bad guys learn how to do it. And this is one of the big ones for service that you can buy people. I did a little research this week, and price range between $150 to $500 to drop somebody's website off the internet. Think about that, $500. They'll drop your website off the internet. Now, what kind of bad person would do that? Because what could it do to you? How many of you generate revenue over the internet? Okay, I've got a client that does about 7 million a day over the internet. Would they be concerned if they were taken offline? Absolutely. And we all know in business it's cash flow that keeps you alive. Kill the cash flow for 4 or 5 days at 6, 7 million a day, you have a big problem on your hands. Okay, you can't say to TXU, we'll pay you next month. We have a little cyber problem this month. Okay, so the bottom line is, how can we stop a DDoS attack against a website versus how can we eliminate the loss associated with a DDoS attack? Does everybody follow the difference there? One's trying to stop it. One's saying, okay, they're going to attack us, big deal. How do we eliminate the loss? Okay, where does my client lose money? If people can't get on their website and transact business, they don't get the money that goes with it, right? It's not the server that everybody's crying about. It's not the actual code of the website. It's not the HTML that everybody's worried about. It's the cash flow. And by the way, if I could open up a lemonade stand on the street and make $7 million a day, nobody would care about the website. You with me on this? It's about $7 million a day, not the cyber stuff. Now, all of us that are into cybersecurity, we're into the code and all the cool gizmos and gadgets and technology. The reality is, all I want is the $7 million a day. So can you get it to me if this happens? Can we outmaneuver that loss? Okay, when the site is down, what are we losing? We're losing transactional revenue. And by the way, I'm just giving you this one example. I want you guys to take this concept for many, many other possible loss factors. Reputation harm, access to data for traveling for your personnel, business plans, engineering drawings, building facilities. All of this, you look at what would the loss be. In this case, we're talking about revenue generation. So when the site's down, what are we losing? We're losing cash. How can we design our system not to lose any value of the site being up? I mean, I want to figure out how I keep money flowing. So here's what we did. First of all, we acquired data sets and data of the top buyers and purchasers on that site. We want to know everybody who's important. How many of you know you don't all get a trophy in life? Okay, this is crazy stuff. I'm running into 25-year-olds that don't know that we don't give a crap what they think. Okay? We have a staff meeting, and there are certain people sit in, they open their mouth, they're getting thrown out of there. Okay, we are a paramilitary type organization. We're not like a touchy-feely, let's all get along routine. We're like, let's attack and overcome. And if you get killed in front of me, thanks for taking a bullet. You got to step over your body because I got to keep going. Okay, it's not the love fest, right? But when you get into this, people have to realize not everybody counts the same. $7 million. Here's back up. How many of you know what percentage of America pays 95% of the income tax? Right. 1%? How about this? I almost fell over the other day. 60% of America pays no income tax at all now. They just get credit tax back to them from us. Who came up with that program? Okay, bottom line, yeah, right. Who voted last, right? The bottom line of this deal is that you got to realize who the revenue generators are. So if I go to the website and I look at my $7 million a day, where's that money coming from? If there's 50,000 people that access that website a day, how many of you would believe that the majority of the money comes from 5,000 or less of them? It's true. So advanced thinking, you want me to protect the revenue flow. I go out, I figure out by my data sets who's spending the most money, who's most regular, not just once a month, but because, hey, statistically, if the guy only comes on once a month, what are the odds he's going to come on the day we crash the site? But I want someone who comes on 4 times a week and spends X amount of money every time they come in. Those are my revenue generators. I create that data set, and by the way, nobody knows I'm doing this. Okay? You have to learn not to talk. That can be very hard for certain people. And we'll get into what a secret is in a second. But the bottom line is, I create the data set of who I have to keep online, and they're not all equally as important. I can say I'm sorry to some people, but I don't want to say, hey, where's my $350,000 to others? Got it? Okay. We create a ghost site. A ghost site is an exact replica of the website, except nobody knows about it and nobody can see it because we don't put it on the net. Couple key points. Rules of a secret. It's not a secret when the second person knows. Everybody will rat you out for the right reason. So don't be telling people who don't need to know about the ghost site, because then it's not going to work. And if you're in a collaborative environment where they think everybody needs to know everything, you're not going to pull this off. If you're in a collaborative environment with those who have a need to know, because by them knowing they can help you do it, that'll work. So we talk about practicing need to know. That means unless you're doing something that contributes to the success of the project, we're not telling you about it. It's not being rude. It's not being that we don't like you. It's not because we don't like your new haircut. It's because you don't have a need to know to help us get the job done. It's real factual. Then, compartmentalize your solution. Nobody gets to know everything. If this gets out, 5 of you went bad all at the same time, which is pretty slim. And when I compartmentalize and something gets out, when we do the investigation, I only got to talk to 3 people instead of 35. Does that make sense, everybody? You only get to know what you need to know to do your part of what is getting done. And just be real happy the other guys are doing it, because if the revenue keeps flowing, you get a paycheck. Okay? If the revenue doesn't flow, you're going to be out of a job. So if you like where you work and it's convenient to drive there from home, help out and don't worry about not knowing the whole puzzle. We build redundancy on all redundant components, because we all know if it can fail, it will. So we always have multiple backup capacities with the Go site. Now, have metrics on when the Go site goes active. You can't flip this on every time someone hiccups, okay? So let's say the metrics might be if we have a DDoS attack going on, we're offline for more than 4 hours, and revenue has dropped more than $200,000 today. Those are my key points of when we go to the Go site. Does that make sense to everybody? You got to know when you switch this on. Or by the way, if you don't have metrics, people want to turn it on to watch it work, which is really stupid. But there'll be fascination. The CEO will come by and show them the secret thing. Bad idea. It's not a secret now. Okay? So you have metrics when you turn on, when you don't. Pre-approve which data sets are notified to switch. So when we bring up a Go site on a completely different server from a completely different location with a completely non-related IP, when that thing comes on, we notify those key sets of data. You need to go to this site right now. And in some cases, we even looked at a couple automation systems where we would automate from the user side, not from our original server. Why don't we use the original server site? Yeah, the bad guys are going to see where you're routing to, and away you go. Now you drop 2 sites. Think like a maniac bad person when you're designing this. So we notify our key users, hey, you're part of a special club, but we don't tell them ahead of time. We tell them when they're trying to get in and they're bouncing, we already know who to contact, right? Because we did our homework. We know who the buyers are. We know who access. We go tell them, reroute to this site for the next 24 hours, 48, whatever you want to make up, and you take those orders on that other Go site and you keep your cash flow going without ever putting it out on the net, without ever releasing. And by the way, the PR people want to tell everybody what's going on. You don't need to be telling them what's going on at $7 million a day, okay? You just go get the money. Consider the use of countermeasures to protect the detection of the Go site. There's lots of stuff. I know there's a lot of creative people. There's lots of stuff you guys can do to keep someone from figuring out the new IP address. Everybody with me on that? And if nobody knows, and it wasn't launched by one of your selected few in the data set, and if you get hit on the Go site, remember I said have redundancy? If you get hit on the Go site, I'd be looking at who you just notified in your limited data set to see where it came from. And I do some heavy-duty countermeasures to track those guys down. But the fact is, you bring it back up, you have good countermeasures to protect the new site, and then you sanitize the access and the location of the Go site and relocate it if necessary. And in fact, you can actually relocate it every couple of hours if you want to, as long as you keep sending the transmission back to your key data sites of where you're getting your revenue from. Does everybody follow that? Okay. That has nothing to do with stopping the DDoS. And by the way, that's fine if that's going on at the same time, because we'd like to bring the real site back up for all the regular people that don't spend $350K a person. We want to get it back online, but you've got to have consequence management going on to protect the big revenue stream while you bring the regular website back online. Okay, so let me back up here real quick. Well, let me mention this fast. The US DHS has come out with this, it's called C Cubed. How many of you heard of this? Okay, C Cubed is this new outreach to the private sector, and they've got a bunch of documents and a bunch of guides, and they have a toolkit on how you can be more cyber secure and all that good stuff. At our table out in the hallway, we have the front page of each of 6 documents that are in the toolkit up on the little poster board thing. And if you want that kit, just give our guys your name and email address, and I'll send it to you, okay? This came out of DC. I got it like 6 days ago, I think, with a new toolkit, and it's coming out of a new office inside the Secretary's Office of Homeland Security for the private outreach. I haven't even figured out yet how it works with InfraGard and everything else, but I'm telling you, some interesting things in this toolkit, some documents, some websites, some resources, etc. You want a copy of all that jazz? Let our guys know, and we'll send it to you by email. Okay, general questions? By the way, that's my email if you want the presentation. Drop me a note.
Any concerns with the number of Fortune 500 companies that are doing things like adopting Microsoft 365 or Google?
I think the biggest concern I have is most corporations are making financial moves, not even thinking about the headache of trying to do any kind of prosecution down the road when they get clipped. And as soon as you get in the cloud and your data is developed in one country, transmitted to another, stored in a third, the whole thing changes dramatically. And where it's going to hit them is going to be stock value. At some point in time, someone's going to hit one of the Fortune 500s. They're going to lose their data. They're going to lose some engineering drawings or marketing plans for next year. And their stock value is going to tank. So I'm not sure that they've compartmentalized the data. A lot of them have not, that I've dealt with. They're just putting everything out there, and they don't compartmentalize it. Some of the companies are saying, these are the categories you can go in the cloud with, and these categories you cannot, categories of data. But I do think that there's a lack of full understanding at the top of the cybersecurity risk for going outside the internal network of the company. That's just my experience.
Anybody else?
So just a follow-on about stock value. I think it really depends on who gets breached. For example, Target, we all know was breached. Their shares dropped about $6 a share after the breach, but they are now, a year and some months later, up $25 a share from the pre-breach levels. So I sort of specialize in following data breaches, and certainly not disagreeing with you that there are going to be some people that get hammered, but it's kind of like one size doesn't fit all. I think that's important.
And the comment I make on that is Target got hacked for customer personal information, where I'm referring to is corporations that get hacked for their product designs, marketing plans, internal information that increases the value of the company down the road.
Right.
And I would agree with you on Target's report. The average consumer has a history knowledge of 48 hours. And after they get clipped, other than the class action lawsuit for a couple $2 billion, other than something like that, most people never even see it in the news unless they're one of the victims. And with what the companies are doing to help them with credit monitoring and all that, most people get over it pretty quick. It's not too personally impacted, and many of the credit card companies are taking the hit for that. Yes, sir.
What you said, I bet you just love the Internet of Things and the identity of things and the Internet of Things. Would you mind commenting on how crazy that's going to get in a little bit, maybe?
You mean like with all the URL domain changes and the assignment of who's who up in that?
No, more the Internet of Things where they can close your garage door. use something like that, somebody can take that over.
Right, so the expansion of control, well, here's the deal, the way I look at it. We already have industrial control systems, which are really big issues, and we've had a lot of breaches in the last couple of years. The ICS CERT, Federal 13 for ICS, had a gigantic spike in the response last year, and 80% of them were in the energy sector, going after the grids and all that. So here's the way I look at it. What we're doing is we're taking ICS for corporations where they've got cybersecurity teams trying to protect them, and they're being penetrated. And now we're going to do the same thing for the consumer at a much lower level where there's absolutely nobody looking over security, nobody who understands it, and no actual recourse when your door gets popped open by a bad guy going down the street because you've got it set up with internet access. I mean, I look at it as something that we're not prepared for because the end user is not educated on what you got to do to protect them. When we're doing investigations and we're driving down the street, we'll scan 1 out of 3 routers has no password on it. I mean, a typical residential neighborhood, I can hit every 3rd house and get into the router. And I'll find computers unsecured all the time, running around the clock in a residence. So when we're going down the street scanning, and the security levels are horrendous in the residential communities, as you add the water temperature, the air conditioning, the refrigerator lighting, all that to the net, 2 things are going to happen. 2 things are going to happen. One, tremendous bandwidth is going to change. Maybe I should do that. I think we're going to have a tremendous bandwidth problem in the neighborhoods. They just got done running all the lines in a couple of years ago. All of a sudden they're going to find out that everybody automates a house, the bandwidth is going to drop for regular data. And then the second part is wide open security. So I think it's really cool. There's a lot of cool gizmos and gadgets out there, but I'm not sure the public's ready to use them in a responsible manner. Yes, sir.
You may mention bad guys, specific criminal elements, actually engaged in direct physical and violent retaliation against private sector, I guess also government entities. At one point, the nation states, weren't engaged in such behavior overtly, if not actually sparking off a major international incident.
Okay, so the question is, when I mentioned that criminals retaliate against people that mess with them, and by the way, if you spike some guy's computer and they're making $10 million a year, they are going to come looking for you. But you just put them for $10 million, even though it's illegal money, it was their $10 million until you messed with them. The question is, when will nation states start doing that? Well, number one, they are doing it right now, and you're correct. Covert agents operate inside the country. That stuff's going on already. And there's ongoing efforts by various nation states to diminish our cybersecurity efforts. And if you guys look at the exploitation of some of the software programs, obviously they were done with people with big staffs, with big horsepower behind them. So that's happening right now. When would they take it to the overt physical side? Well, I don't know. It kind of depends on what the world does. Right now we have countries going over other countries' borders and taking over the country and no one says a word about it. That's a real bad precedent to set. If I can physically take over your country and no one makes a peep, why would I not attack you on your cyber level? I think my concern comes back to what I just said about the ICS CERT report. If you guys haven't seen that, the ICS Industrial Control System CERT, Computer Emergency Response Team from the feds, their monitor report comes out. And if you haven't seen the latest one, I got a copy with me. But if you look at all the attacks on the power stations and the grids, and as the Secretary Chief of Nuclear, I get involved in nuclear power stations. If you look at this rapid increase, it's got to be, I mean, there could be a couple guys eating Cheetos in their mom's basement messing around, but the majority of those power grid attacks, I'll bet, are nation states. They're jerking around to see what they can do to control our electricity. You control our electricity, you control our economy. You control our economy, you control our military. And our military operates on taxes from our economy. So I believe they're doing it right now at the cyber level. I don't know how soon they'll come in, but I'll tell you what, you see any kind of fires, explosions, or anything around data switch facilities or any kind of data centers, start thinking about that. Because there's no real value for someone to go in and destroy a data center unless they want to kill the data or the lines that are going through there to connect up to whatever systems they support. So I don't think it's all that far down the road. I don't know that the nation states would be crazy enough to do it if our government is being a leader again. So you got to kind of watch the politics in Washington and say, what's the threat like? But if we continue on the path we're on right now, nobody's afraid of us right now. The guys in Honduras are talking about throwing rocks at the White House knowing they won't get caught. Okay, so I hate to say it, but I mean, as far as the international, when I travel international all the time, nobody is afraid of us and nobody respects our military capacity at all. Now, you use it a couple times, they'll catch on real quick. But the fact is, we've lost this real strong status and some of you don't like it.
We have one more question over here, sir. That'll be our last question.
Yes. What are your views on like teenagers and young adults between 10 and 18 who think DDoS attacks or spiking or getting in the SME system is a toy and a joke that they can just use whenever they feel like it?
Well, I think all teenagers should do 10 years in the military first. That'll solve part of the problem. Actually, the thing about the teenagers, and I'm going to take this from working on the street and arresting teenagers for other crimes. A lot of teenagers that I've arrested didn't get what they were doing and what the impact and the ramifications were, okay? And I'll take this back real quick. How many of you know a 16-year-old driver that crashed the car in the first year? Happens all the time. Look at all the people, because they think they know how to drive, but they really don't fully understand wet pavement, following too close, texting and driving. They don't get it. And so I come back to the cyber crimes and the hacking and all that. There's a lot of 16-year-olds that are hacking and don't fully understand the ramifications of what they're doing. And I've been in on cases where bad things happen and the kid never intended it to be bad. They just wanted to prove that they could get through. And so I guess part of that is more college programs to formulate a positive direction for those capacities. Some kid who's in his mom's house cracking and hacking and getting through has got talent. It's just misdirected. But I don't think we've had a great outreach into the school system in the past that's been maintaining the same speed of up speed as the kids' capabilities. And like I said, I know 12, 13, 14-year-olds that build robots, are flying drones and doing all sorts of stuff their parents could never fathom, but their school has no program to educate and channel that into a positive direction. So I'm an advocate, that's why I'm here today, of good positive educational programs to channel those capacities, because if we don't, they're going to develop them anyways. Now, back in the day, when your cell phone cost 10 grand, you wouldn't have it. Okay? My first cell phone was $5,000. My first computer was $12,000. When you had that expense going into a device, kids didn't have the stuff. But now, for $100 portable computer in your hand, $300 a laptop with phenomenal horsepower, you can get into a lot of trouble with that. So we have to get on the front side of that, and I think Dave actually has some programs going into the high schools now to do dual credit with the college and try to get the kids while they're still developing and get them in the right positive direction. The other side of it, though, is maturity. It's hard for young folks to understand the impact of what they're doing when they don't see the big picture. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the big picture only comes with a little bit of age and a little bit of experience. So then you need to be monitored. Okay? All right, thank you very much. I'll be outside if you have any questions. Thank you.